So we're going to talk about some security related things today, and also about modules who maybe don't feel good about themselves, but we're going to help them feel better about themselves. The insecure module. So thanks for the courtesy laugh, appreciate it. My name is Mark Shropshire. I go by Shrop out on the internet, so I've been doing Drupal since probably about 2004, site building for a number of years, and then getting into development and other things. And I work at Media Current, and so I focus quite a bit on security, but also do a lot of development and that kind of work there. And Media Current is a web agency that does a lot of large-scale Drupal sites. I know you guys have heard about this in a number of sessions, and if you heard the keynote today with Dave and Paul, that was pretty informative. But lots of good sites, lots of good work. We have a lot of fun there. So, and today we're covering a few different topics along the way. So we're going to talk about web application security risks, and just to kind of keep everybody awake, let's make it interactive so we can chat about it a little bit, ask questions along the way. We don't have to do Q&A at the end necessarily, so feel free to ask. We're going to kind of do a security audit / code review of a module that I've prepared to talk about. And we're going to talk about security in the Drupal community, kind of how that works, how it's approached, and then some additional considerations, which is a nice way of saying miscellaneous, but not really. So we're going to talk security things. Anybody? All right. So as far as security risks, there are scary things in the woods, people. Scary things that you got to watch out for. And security risks are definitely real and cost money. So this is just an example of some research here that as far as the cost of security that can when security goes wrong and things like that. So this is something to definitely keep in mind and consider. Especially as developers, it's easy to get tunnel vision along the way and just kind of work till your code works and operates. How many folks in here are developers or have identified as developer at some point? What are other folks doing? What's your roles? What's that? QA. Okay, good, cool. So kind of from a developer standpoint, in a QA folks would, I think, understand developers can get super tunnel vision and they're like, it works the way I want it. Don't tell me about any of those QA issues. But it's easy in those moments to kind of not think about or rush to get something finished and not think about and focus on the what could possibly be a security problem. So we're going to talk about some of that. OWASP. How many people are familiar with OWASP in that group? So OWASP is got a lot of great resources out on the net. It's the Open Web Application Security Project, and one of the things that they've done is they've had a top 10 list. You may have heard about this, but so we're going to kind of go through some of these kind of quick. I don't want to spend a ton of time on them, but feel free to ask along the way. So a real common security issue, SQL injection. This one can be kind of scary, but this is where somebody can, just an example, someone could, if you write, for instance, not using Drupal APIs properly, someone could actually drop tables in your database or inject or insert data, read data, that kind of thing, just because of the way your SQL is written in code. So it's an easy one to miss. Drupal makes it a lot easier for us to not have that problem, but it doesn't guarantee it. Drupal Gidden, for instance, if you're familiar with that, was related. So broken authentication and session management. This is one where kind of like doing crypto, people who decide that they know all the maths and can do cryptography well. This is one where it's it's kind of like when I hear a developer say, "Well, I'm going to write my own session management for an application." That's warning flag should go off. Same when someone says, "I'm going to write my own crypto." So that can it is a challenge to do good session management, and obviously that in web world, sessions are how you store and carry on. Is this person authenticated and able to use the current session that they're in? So it can definitely be something to keep an eye on. And but yeah, so you definitely want to have that stuff solid. Again, an advantage, we'll talk more about it, but an advantage of using Drupal is that is built in and baked in and works pretty well.
If I could make
Yeah.
a comment, base 64 encode is not encryption.
just because you can't interpret it, right? Just because it's scrambled. Yeah.
It's encoding, which is different.
Yeah, that is a valid point. Encoding is definitely different. So yeah, just if you look at a stream of packets and just because it looks like gibberish, that does not mean it's encrypted. So good point. Cross-site scripting. This is probably one of the more common issues we see with Drupal. This is a situation where, and we'll see some examples, but this is a situation where you can basically you could run JavaScript, whatever JavaScript you want on a page. I mean, that's fun, right? And even run remote JavaScript. So have JavaScript run from another server somewhere else that another person controls. And anytime a user visits a certain page, they get served that JavaScript. If that doesn't sound scary, it should. I'll just say that, because you could do a lot with that. It's kind of a big issue. So insecure direct object references. So just, loosely think about a situation where we are not sure if the user has access to a data element. This is again is something that's nice having a framework that allows us to have some of those controls. But again, even just using the Drupal API doesn't guarantee this. You still have to take some responsibility about access control. And so we'll talk more about that, some more examples along the way. This is one that I see a lot. It's super common, security misconfiguration. So one thing to keep in mind is the security of a web application. You have to really think about the entire stack. This is not just the code. If as a developer you may just focus on the code, but keep in mind that you can have a security vulnerability in your web server and your database, your network, anything that's in between the user and getting the data, all the way through the stack is possible. And any of those pieces can be misconfigured, so to have a problem. That seems obvious, but it's, and it is, I guess, but it happens quite a bit. From a Drupal standpoint, a misconfiguration could be something as simple as something in a Drupal UI that's forgotten to be handled. Maybe you didn't turn on the right module, didn't turn off the right module, maybe you didn't have the right role set or permission set, that kind of thing. So sensitive data exposure. This is again, these are quotes from the OWASP site that could fit on the screen and that sort of thing. But simply not encrypting sensitive data, I think that's a part of it. So encryption is definitely a part of things. Kind of using HTTPS, there's a lot more to that. But also just exposure. Even if you're encrypting the channel that the person's viewing, how about just exposing data that you didn't intend to expose? Not having access control. Having a web service endpoint just expose any node from a Drupal site, whether or not the user should see it, but they can access it just by incrementing node numbers or NIDs. That's a problem. So missing functional level access control. So again, this kind of goes back to the system security misconfigurations and that sort of thing. But we'll see some examples with hook menu, but which is I think a pretty good example. But even just setting permissions correctly. One of the things that I like to do in an audit is take a look at the roles in a Drupal site, take a look at the permissions. But I like to ask clients, here's a list of the roles. Tell me who has these. What are they for? What do they do? And then there's a lot of blank expressions. They can't remember why they put the roles there. Don't know, when they were created. Don't have it documented. So that's it's really sometimes the simple things, and you may be exposing parts of your site or application that you don't even realize. Cross-site request forgery. This is a situation, kind of a good example is, let's say you've got a web application, not necessarily Drupal, but in a query string you can say you have a query string delete equals number, and that's it, right? And anybody that comes along to that URL can just start changing the numbers and deleting data. Could be nodes. That's not a fun situation to have, and to get around it, to prevent it, involves ensuring that the user, number one, has access to the bit of data that maybe in that situation they could delete, but also the data that also make sure that that there actually is somebody that's authenticated to a session to even be able to do that kind of function. But it can also be not just destructive. It could be well, it's all destructive, I guess, in a sense, but it may not be deleting always. That's used as a common example, but also just some type of edit function on something that they shouldn't have. Drupal has some mechanisms to prevent that, but again, it doesn't. There's tokens. There's also confirm pages, hooks. But again, these are things that developers have to be responsible to use. And just because they're there doesn't mean that they're used properly. This one seems so obvious. Using components with known vulnerabilities. It seems obvious, but yet this happens all the time. And again, this is all the way through the stack. So, let's say Drupal 7.5, I think 7.5.1 came out recently. 7.5.2 comes out, 8.2 just came out, but let's say the next release is a security release of those, and you update your Drupal site, you feel like, hey, this is great, everything's good, but a library didn't update, maybe, and we've seen some of this recently, where using Composer, and this happened during the Guzzle update, if you don't update with Composer and do all the right Composer switches, you can actually update and have Drupal update, but not have some of the dependencies update along the way, leaving you exposed still and still vulnerable with those components. So those are some examples. But also just, is the rest of the stack up to date, that sort of thing. So it's always good to be checking on all the components that make up the whole web stack. Unvalidated redirects and forwards. So in web, redirects happen all the time. Forms are submitted, and you go to other pages. But this is a situation where you basically allow users to land on a page through a forward process, and maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe they shouldn't be there, or maybe they're seeing data they shouldn't. So definitely another issue that can happen. So guess what? Drupal. I like to call it a content management framework. I don't know if that's still a thing being said. But I think Krell maybe coined that at some point, or at least there's a blog article. But I really have hung on to that. I think it's more of a framework than a content management system in a traditional sense, because you can do so much with it. But Drupal has a lot of things to defend against a lot of these issues built in. So we'll talk about some of those. But again, just blindly saying, well, I'm using Drupal and I'm using Drupal API calls alone, that's a good step, but that doesn't, you can still misuse pieces. So that's always something to keep in mind. So let's talk about secure Drupal development. So kind of going off what I was just talking about, utilize the Drupal API. So if there are, if you're writing some PHP and there's a PHP function and there's a comparable Drupal API call for that function, use the Drupal function. Good example is and we'll talk about that, is the database layer. You want to use Drupal's database abstraction layer and those calls, because and again, you can do it the wrong way, but they'll get you down the road. But there's controls, and depending on which calls you make, that actually ensure that you're getting that user's the nodes that user has access to, and not anything additional. So it's real important. You want to keep your modules, themes, libraries up to date. Don't forget the libraries. Don't forget all those plugins and JavaScript libraries and things like that live in a libraries folder. Cites all libraries, because that can definitely be an issue. Following Drupal coding standards. How many folks follow the coding standards, or at least try to in here? And if you don't, it's fine. But does everybody know about the coding standards? So good. That's that I'll explain a little more why I think that's a part of secure development. It's a philosophical thing maybe, but I think that's a big piece. And we'll see some examples. But if you can't read the code, if another developer, or even yourself, 6 months later can't read the code, follow what was going on, when you try to debug or work on something, you may actually introduce more problems or create vulnerabilities just because of the fact that you're having trouble reading it. So. And I'm sure everyone in here has probably opened code that someone else wrote, and you get kind of sick on your stomach because it looks so bad. And maybe some of that code was even yours. Maybe it was previous code you wrote, and you realize, wow, I've learned so much, or I've gained so much knowledge, and I would not have done it that way. That's fine, and that's part of the learning process. But just following those standards gets you a long way. And we'll talk about some tools that help you follow those. We already mentioned checking on the permissions and roles are configured properly. And there's 2 links in here. And I'll make sure that the slides get up on the site. But there's the 7 and the 8 security docs. And I think most of these I think have been moved in the new documentation migration on Drupal.org. But these are something that you should continuously read, look for updates, watch this area, and just be familiar with this area of the Drupal site. It really documents much of what we're talking about today. I'm trying to bring some extra things that I've picked up from doing some client audits and things like that that I think are extra. But these are great resource for developers. They're more developer and code centric, so keep in mind they won't tell you a lot of the things about security. It's a whole big world out there that goes into the infrastructure and things like that. So there's a lot more than just that, but it's a great start for development. Drupal 8 has made security even easier from coding in certain ways, and I did want to kind of bring this mention in. One of the big things is that, and how many folks have worked on a Drupal 8 project yet in here, kind of got going? So we've got kind of half the room. I've got one going, but it's a discovery project, so it's not the same as a build, but it's still getting me in there. So in Drupal 8, one of the things that's really huge is that the Twig template engine has just the way it has auto escaping, and it doesn't allow PHP to be coded into the templates. Helps us prevent SQL injection and cross-site scripting. That's really huge, because so many of the problems with security on Drupal sites wind up being in a template. I've done reviews where I really feel like whoever coded the Drupal site, they really thought that Drupal was all about the template PHP, because they wrote the CMS inside the template PHP file. And to me, we kind of joke and laugh about that a little bit, but the perspective I see when I see that is this person that coded it may have been a good developer in PHP. They didn't understand Drupal and how it worked. They didn't understand the best practices and what should go in a module, and then how you should expose it back out to the theme. So some of those things just can't happen, and obviously doing a lot of business logic in a theme, to me, goes against separating your presentation from your actual your business logic. So it's good that we can't do all that now and kind of protect ourselves. So session management's been improved. There's tokens have been added for the routing system. I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, for those of you that have done D8 can kind of confirm that I'm right on this, but I'm pretty sure that's an optional thing. You have to say I want a token on a route, but you can now add tokens pretty easily to a route configuration. PHP can only send one query to MySQL at a time. So that's a help, to not be able to stream a bunch of them in one call. So clickjacking prevention is in D8, a form of it. I did a little bit of research into this. Security Kit is still beneficial. I think it adds some additional features on top of what's in, but it's still a great step forward. And they have since backported the clickjacking from D8 to D7. And again, I still like the SecKit, Security Kit module for some fine tuning and some additional things you can do, but but even Drupal 7's got that now.
Could you expound on exactly what that is a little bit? Clickjacking?
Yeah, clickjacking, I don't know if I've got a good example in mind for that. David, do you happen to know like of a good example that, how to describe it without showing it? There's some really good YouTube videos of it being done.
If you were going to have JavaScript on a page, you could alter the contents of a URL in an href tag to open a different page than what the link intended.
So it's sort of masking the link from the user so they can't see what the action is going to be.
So it would require a combination of cross-site scripting to inject the JavaScript, and then the JavaScript does the clickjacking.
It's one way.
Yeah.
Or you could have a man-in-the-middle attack on a network where somebody has intercepted your network traffic and is redirecting you to a different website by changing your HTTP headers.
Yeah, so the definition here on Google is pretty darn close to what David's talking about: the malicious practice of manipulating websites' users' activity by concealing hyperlinks beneath legitimate clickable content. So you're hiding.
You can have a transparent image overlay that takes the entire content of the page, so that you think you're clicking a link over it, but there's an overlaid CSS transparent image on top that is a URL to a different page.
I think that's the kind I've seen on the videos, is where someone thinks they're clicking on something, but really like that their mouse winds up clicking on like a.
That seems beyond Drupal's capability to prevent.
There's ways to prevent it, because like the Security Kit module has been doing it for a long time. It's a default out of the box. It's a default out of the box feature when you install that module, and that works on D7 too. You just install that and it'll help prevent it. I cannot remember what it goes into, what it does to prevent it without looking at the code, but.
Well, one of them is an HTTP header that gets added to the transactions, so that there are. One is to prevent your website from being framed. So one of the ways to clickjack a website is to wrap the entire thing in a frame, but that the outer frame has still got control over what you're clicking inside that frame.
Yeah, and that header is that's a standard, that's not a Drupal thing, but it's a standard web standard.
So
Yeah.
Frame options HTTP header would tell the client web browser that if it's receiving that HTTP header of X frame options done, I think that, or I forget the deny or same origin. So denied, no framing at all, or same origin. It can only be framed by other pages of that same domain.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, some of them can be pretty nasty too. If you look on YouTube for clickjacking, there's some. Watching this stuff on video, by the way, I encourage everybody to go try that. That is some scary business to see what people can do. Watching, of course, for the academic part of it, right? So, and
Watch some videos on Pineapple Wi-Fi.
yeah, that is. I've seen some of that live actually, and that is nuts.
Something to watch for at conferences like this.
Yeah, yeah. It's why I'm not hanging around on this network without VPN. And then Drupal 8 standardized the configurable trust host patterns. You'll see a message about this if you don't have it set up and how to set it up in a Drupal 8 site. But that's basically trying to get your Drupal site to respond to other host requests when it comes in, so another domain host. There's some ways to help with that in Drupal 7. You know, one of the things you can do is set base URLs, things like that. But so it kind of got me in a mode where I'll set my base URL a lot of times just because it feels better. It doesn't, you know. And sometimes that's not even necessary, but that was a nice addition. So you'll notice, in related to this, if you go to the writing secure code on Drupal 8 versus Drupal 7, there are a lot less examples right now, at least, and that can change, right? If things are found or whatever, but there are a lot less examples in the Drupal 8 page for Drupal 7 of writing secure code. So I'm focusing a little more on Drupal 7, but I'd like everybody to leave thinking more about the overall, like, keeping security minded and thinking about questioning the code you've written and having it reviewed by others and that sort of thing. Because new vulnerabilities will be found with Drupal 8. It's just going to happen. But that is an interesting point, though. It's nice to see security continue to improve, and as Drupal 8 moves into more enterprise type situations, I think that's gonna help. So the woods were scary, but the module wanted to have a stable release, but we've got a ways to go. We're not going to stable release this module. Actually, this module that I'm going to show is one I'm working on. So is everybody familiar with the examples modules for developers? It's a real nice set of modules out there. I think it's just drupal.org/project/examples, maybe. It's a great project. It's a great one to contribute to if you find some things. I actually found some stuff preparing for this presentation that I want to contribute back. But I'm taking the concept of that, and I've made a module that I'm working on called Security Examples, which I'm going to put in a sandbox and keep it sandboxed with all the warnings of don't install this anywhere. I'm waiting to be flagged by somebody in the security world if Drupal, but hopefully not. I haven't required the bad judgment module. So you have to at least, yeah. So when you install this module, and I will get it out there on a sandbox so people can play around with it, but I want to finish commenting more in it. It requires that you install the bad judgment module. So it should make people think, if they're having to install a module called bad judgment, maybe they're making some bad judgment by running this. So this is something that I'm running local in a Vagrant install, and I would not run it. I wouldn't even run it on a test site and have it out on the open internet. So let's take a look at this module. This is a 7 module, but again, it's still a good. So there's our bad judgment module, and so just if you're curious, all you got to do is say dependencies equals bad judgment like any other module. Can everybody see that? Let me zoom in some more. Is that legible, sort of? All right. So let's take a look. So we're going to do some review stuff. Let's talk about some coding standards at first. So I've got this security examples include file. Has anybody else in here opened up a PHP or Drupal file and seen a file that looks like this? Ever? No, I don't mean exactly. And you don't have to think too hard about this. Anyway, this is special, but I'll tell you what I'm getting at. I have open files that have mega bunches of spaces in PHP. The indentions are not set up right. The tabs versus spaces kind of thing. API keys just sitting around in code for anybody to take. This is a production Amazon key. Write it down and go use it. The so this is and notice the first line goes off the page here because it's telling me something important that I'm probably not going to read because it's going off the edge of the page and it's not staying within 80 columns. So the point here is this is what can happen if you have this kind of and all the red. By the way, I've got Vim set up so that I can see white space. So this is some extra white space that shouldn't be here.
Function names are jacked up.
Yeah, function names are crazy. That's not the way you write them, and tabs, and I've got all kinds of stuff. And actually, if I save this, I've got Code Sniffer as a tool, the coder module.
You should wrap the title in a T function.
Yeah, and you're overriding your bar.
You caught that. And I'm actually not using the var in the function. So these are code review things that are really good exercises. So how many folks here are on any team or even in the open source world that have done code reviews? Been a code reviewer, had code reviewed? If you haven't, I encourage you to do so. Even if you have to do some pairing up with somebody that works for a different agency or a different company that you can work with and it's approved and all. It's really great to have somebody like so. David and Cameron both identified things right away. They saw if I'm in the middle of writing this beautiful code, I might have just thought it's working, right? It's working. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is 6 months from now, am I going to understand what's going on in it? Even without the actual issues. And that's right. There's no T function wrapping that. Good find. What's that?
There shouldn't be one on hook menu, but there should be.
Yeah, that's true. Hook menu doesn't need it because it calls it. But where was the other one that needs it?
But that's why you should wrap it in T.
Yeah. And so, and this gets, I pulled some stuff from the code. So, all right. So Coder actually checks for all this stuff. We'll get you a good start. And so I've got this set to do that. And so some of it's kind of going off screen because I'm zoomed so much, but. So whatever you're using to edit code, Vim's the best one, but if you're using something else, it's fine. I'm just kidding. Pretty much every editor, Sublime, PHP Storm, Vim, Atom, Visual Studio Code by Microsoft, they all have some support for PHP Code Sniffer, which then you can use the Drupal Coder project with. This thing checks to say, hey, your line exceeds 80 characters. I don't have doc blocks. I don't have a file doc at the top. All those standards. And in the Drupal coding standards page, I think I've got a link to it in the presentation. But if you search coding standards, I think the Drupal coding standards in Google ranks really high, so it'll come up. But if you type Drupal coding standards, you'll get it pretty quick. So definitely run that. Have it automated somehow. You can have Jenkins fired off when you do pull requests or merges into repos. You can run it locally like this. It's definitely good stuff. So I've got a module here that I was going to show some demos. And like I said, I'll get this out there got a few security related examples. I just want to have the code pulled up, but let me kind of show you what what I'm working with so far. So I've got, so number one, secret page. I'm actually logged in. Let me log out. I'm logged out of Drupal. I'm going to click on secret page. This is such a simple one, but it's something that's easy to forget. So I'm logged out and I'm on a page called secret page, list of secrets, secret item 1, 2, and 3. I'm thinking that probably that's not for anonymous users, but I could be wrong. This would be a red flag, like in an audit kind of thing. So, so let's take a look at this. In the hook menu, secret. Where's my secret? All right, so in my hook menu, my secret page. So this, and I've got several other of these just for convenience for the developer. That's what'll get you in trouble every time. But notice this access callback true. While you can do that, I'm just going to say that if you can, don't ever put that in there unless you're absolutely positive that that thing is always going to be for anonymous users. And even then, you might want to really think twice. If it's a route, if you're declaring a route or anything with hook menu, callback or whatever, if you can go ahead and think about what role should be tied, or what permission should be tied to this, go ahead and assign a permission right now. Just do it as you code it. It's a good practice to just do it, because that's one of the things in an audit that I grep for this thing. I grep for access callback true, and then I start looking at routes and saying, what are they, what kind of routes are open? And maybe it's fine. Maybe they all can be open, and it's not a problem, but it's easy to find. So does that make sense, everybody? That that's just allowing it for anybody to view? That could be okay, but it might not be. In this case, it's probably not good because it's secrets page. So, we don't need Russian hackers. This could actually be, this could be it. They just access the page and we're there. It's that immediate. So sometimes we can create our own problems and nobody has to really hack. They just go to the route. SQL injection. This is an interesting example here. So this one actually errors. If I do, so I'm going to enter a node. I know I have a NID because I've used devel generate to generate some content. So I've got a NID of 44, and I can do drop from node, or I could do select now. I could do whatever after a semicolon in this situation, hit submit, and I'm getting a PDO error, but in a lot of cases, this is still creating an unexpected result and crashing the site because I'm not doing any form validation, so that's an issue here. If you look in the code, there's not a validate hook whatsoever. But just for an example, that's how SQL injection is done. It can also be done via query string through a get. So you could this is real common, and it's very scriptable to, especially if the attacker knows it's a Drupal site and then they know the names. They already know the names of tables, right? So then they can start. More common than not. I mean, I'm sure there's folks that try to be destructive and cause harm to the site, but a lot of times people just want information. What information can I get out of the site? That's more interesting, right? So let me just have a situation on a page where I can just go and it lists out. It already has some theming functions tied to it, and I just want to go and have a SQL injection. It just gives me a bunch of data from the node table or from users tables. It can be kind of interesting. Does that make sense, everybody? Kind of how that's scary. Is anybody scared? Y'all don't look scared enough. I'd be freaked out right now because this. By the way, this is all this stuff is super common. This is not like just made up. Like, this is out there. So user input sanitization. Here is so this is a simple form. If I enter submit, it's form API. If I enter submit and hit this, I'm going to get an output of whatever I put in. But if I enter something like some HTML, and let's say that I don't want HTML, it's going to render. It's actually going to render that paragraph. If I look at that, I'm getting I know that text is kind of small, but just trust me. There's P's around that, so it is actually taking that and displaying it without any kind of sanitization. So one thing that you could do on that is I'm going to go down to the function here where I'm displaying it. So inside this form, I'm basically displaying form state, and this is not. There's all kinds of wrong with this module, and that's the part I want to document before I put it out in the sandbox, just so it helps with the education process. But one thing that you could do here, let's say that I don't want anything to be rendered. We could do a check plain. If this is supposed to actually literally be plain text and not show anything. And you notice Code Sniffer, when I save, it warns about the open page callbacks for access control. So even Coder doesn't like that stuff, so it's good not to do it. So anyway, I will.
By the way, is that default, Mark? That, if I took out the access line, would it default to true?
I want to say that it defaults to false, and that nothing gets access, even authenticated users. I want to say that. Don't hold me to that. We could try it in a second. I would think that would be an awesome thing, that it would default to not allow any access. But so now when I submit this, notice that I actually see the text, but it's plain text. It's been encoded so that it's actually not rendering on the browser. That's important. I'll show you. We can do filter cross-site scripting in here too, but I'm going to show you that as a specific situation. So I've clicked on my example for cross-site scripting, and when I hit that page, what I've got some user output, and I'll show you the code, and I immediately get, and it's hard to read, the projector's kind of making it look strange on the font, but what it says is, XSS example, I can run any JS here. So again, you should be scared. Everyone should look frightened. This is cabin in the woods kind of stuff. So what's going on there is this. I've got a database query, and I'm reading a record from the database using DB query. I'm using DB query, so it should be perfectly safe, right? Not a problem. Come on, guys. I'm using the API. This is an example of when you're code reviewing. Don't just assume because we're using, those calls that it's fine. And inside, I've got a little table here for security examples, which we'll use for other things. But I've actually got a little piece that I like to keep around for testing, and it just is going to pop up a JavaScript alert. So I'm reading that out of the database, and I'm just outputting it without anything right there, right? So what can we do for that? Let's wrap that, since this is user input, so we don't trust it, shouldn't trust it. So let's do this. Let's wrap that in filter XSS, which is a function that Drupal provides, one of them for sanitization, and let's run that again. And so it's cleaned it up enough where we can see Drupal's allowing it to show what it feels safe to show, and to not allow the JavaScript to actually run. So the key here is you want to do check plain when it's something that needs to be displayed on the screen. It was user input, it's displayed on the screen, but you want it to be plain text. And filter XSS is the kind of, it still may have some markup, and you may want to show some of the markup, but it's not all, but you don't want it to execute. Did I say that right? Does that sound right? All right, cool. Anyway, so like I said, I'm going to get this in a sandbox out there so folks can kind of mess around with it, and love to have some contribution. So I've got some other examples, but I'm going to kind of move on, and we're running short on time. So any questions on it so far before we move out?
The answer to that question was that it does not default to true. It defaults to the output from the user access function, which does not have a default value either.
That's interesting.
Unless you're UID 1.
Yeah. We'll try that in a minute here. Oh. Yeah, it would be nice if it was a little more clear though, looking at it. But yeah, I'm thinking that along the way I've done that before, and yeah, I got access to I think not just for anonymous, but also authenticated, even if I was admin, which felt kind of good when I didn't have any kind of callback. We can go back to that too, but let me hit on security in the Drupal community a little bit. So in addition to learning about secure coding, the community has even more to offer the module. So there's more to this than just writing good code, and you don't want to write that in a bubble by yourself, and understand that there is a Drupal security team out there, and these are the functions that they provide. This is right off of the security team website. So go check that out. It's good to understand. It's good to read this page and understand what the little shield means. When that little shield now shows up on the project pages, that means that release is under the purview of the security team. Now, just understand that if you decide I'm going to run an alpha or a beta or maybe a dev release, that the security team, they might be aware of some issues and they might help out unofficially in the background, but they're not obligated. They've got plenty of other stuff to do to address those issues, and you're at that point you're kind of should be helping to contribute back to, if you find a security issue, work with the developers in the issue queue to resolve it. But they do a lot with documentation. Some really good sessions on security to check out at, I think Dublin, I realized, had one that looked good, and DrupalCon New Orleans had some good sessions. One of them was called Watching the Hacker Hack. That one's really good. So they had some video recording of hacks happening on a Drupal site. Leverage the issue queue, kind of just mentioned this. So if you're kind of a developer on your own, you're a freelancer, so you can kind of learn about code reviews. You can help code review code, and you can also be code reviewed by contributing on the issue queue. So contribute on Drupal.org, kind of following what Dave and Paul were talking about today at the keynote, and that's a place you could get involved, and you really do learn. I mean, I did a session recently at Media Current on code review process and just kind of how to think about it. And one of the things I said, and this is tough for everybody because everybody's got egos, and I just said, you're going to take that ego for a code review, and you got to go put it in a box, you got to wrap it up, and you got to ship it as far away as possible. Because you can get bruised up pretty bad in a code review, but you got to look at it as a learning experience, because you will learn stuff, and you'll be a better developer if you take it from that attitude, and say, hey, I'm learning from this. And, again, senior developers make mistakes. Lead developers make mistakes. The best developer you think is out there makes mistakes. They're not perfect. So everybody has something to learn. So you can test patches too, another good way to get involved. So there's a link here for best practices for creating and maintaining projects. So I will say this, I know in the past the community's had, a lot of people have complained, and probably justly so, for Drupal.org documentation, and things aren't documented. Documentation is hard. It's hard to keep up with. It's hard to maintain. It's a challenge if you've ever done it. But I will say this, that the whole contributing to a project, maintaining a project on Drupal.org, some of these links that I've got in here, that's some really good docs, I think, out there. In my opinion, it's well done. So because they've got all the stuff, how to make a patch and how to contribute, how to work with the community. So good place to get involved, and you'll learn a ton. So I did want to have to mention Garter. This is a good way. It's really a much more mature at this point on 7, and we're working on the 8. But Garter is a distribution that will, like SecurityKit was mentioned for clickjacking and some other bits. But this is a project. David started this with me years ago. It was one of his ideas, and we've worked on this for years, and I think you may be working on some of these related modules that are in here with Backdrop, but this is a great way to kick off a new site, or even if you don't use it, I would recommend looking at some of the modules selected and saying, hey, those are some good modules for security, and there's some great documentation in there on how and what they do and why they're there and what they cover from a regulatory standpoint.
Most of them have been part of the Backdrop now.
So there you go. So if you're doing Backdrop stuff, check that out, and that's on GitHub under the Backdrop project. I think there's a modules page.
Backdrop has a modules page now.
Yeah.
What is Backdrop?
Backdrop is it's a port. Here's how I'll describe it. It's a port of Drupal 7 when it started to get configuration management, but before the code base went to kind of Drupal 8 to have the Symfony pieces and all that. It's a fork of Drupal. Does that sound fair enough?
It's a fork of Drupal that is intended to remain procedural instead of moving on to the object-oriented library set that Drupal 8 is headed toward. Yeah.
There's some good podcasts that probably would help if you're interested in it. I think Drupal Easy and maybe Lullabot's done some podcasts on that, so check those out. So some additional pieces. I like this photo because this means serious business right here. So the module realized learning about security made the defense of the scary things in the woods possible. Doesn't mean the scary things go away, right? They're always out there, always trying to get us. But that it is possible that we can keep moving forward and hardening our applications and code and doing better. So this is a philosophical concept, but the CIA information security triad. This is a quote from Wikipedia, but it's something that I like. This is a reminder that security. I think sometimes people they take security to mean information security or security for development to mean whatever they kind of their focus is. So if they're a developer, they may think about security in code, and if it's a DevOps person, then their focus may be on security for the systems they manage. Or if it's a QA person, they may be thinking security from a user experience end of things on the front end. But security really encompasses a lot. I mean, denial of service is a lot of times due to performance problems. You're attacking that. So security encompasses a lot. It's a big subject when it comes to InfoSec. Starting kind of, you hear folks talk about mobile first, you hear people talk about user first, accessibility first, but having security first kind of concept, that is something to keep in mind too. So on your list of firsts, and not just from a marketing thing, but from truly the way you think about it, think about securing your application on the way. Don't wait till the end and oh, we're going to launch Monday. By the way, do you have a list of things I should do for launch for security? Oh, by the way, can I get a security audit done over the weekend? We're launching Monday. Probably not the best way to proceed. Probably good to have that thought out, how we're going to include security through the process. That is super common.
I've had too many arguments where people say, we're launching tomorrow. We need a security scan tonight.
Yeah. Well, what happens if you find something? Because you probably will. What does that mean? You're not going to launch?
You've not left a room any room for problems.
Yeah, it is super common, and I think that stuff's going to change. I think all the news you guys may have heard about the latest Linux vulnerabilities, the DNS attacks that went on that caused problems the last few days. This stuff is not going to go away. It's going to keep, So I think there's plenty of things in the news now where people are concerned about security, where I think it's going to help justify those things. But some other building blocks that I thought of that can kind of help along the way to think through this would be, consider the application stack, also the hosting infrastructure. If you're hosting with and I'm not going to name names, but if you're hosting with some Drupal host provider out there, and you have specific concerns or questions, ask them more. If they say they don't give you a good answer, if they just send you to /security, but you really need to know, or your client needs to know something specific, ask them questions. Say, okay, well, what do you use to defend against that? Tell me more about it. That's fair to ask. Or if you really need to have control over it, host the stuff yourself so you have complete control over it. That's a whole nother thing, but it's an option. Use HTTPS with Let's Encrypt, and that's becoming something that should just happen. And there's still considerations around how, and you can still set up HTTPS incorrectly in lots of ways. So that's something to understand. And if you don't understand it fully, then find somebody that can help you with that. But limit the attack surface, meaning if there's something in your system that you don't need, don't run it. That could be a service on a server, that could be a module, that could be a library, a JavaScript library. If that was something, because it's easy to forget you put something in for development purposes and you don't take it out of the repo. That happens quite a bit. Go ahead.
Even on the HTTPS, if I could go back.
Yeah.
For people who are using Cloudflare and they name the pro packages, they've done a lot of pioneering on what secure web is, and they offer it just as a checkbox to turn on, and they'll do the HTTPS redirecting for you, and they do it securely.
Yeah, they know the exact TLS configurations that are right. I agree.
It's off by default, but look for it. It's just toggle it on, and then it'll work.
And they provide other things. You know, you get other advantages of Cloudflare even besides that. So I'd say a very good point. Testing. We got QA folks here. I know in development, it's hard. You're under a crunch. Let's write a bunch of tests. Sometimes it's hard to sell, but you're either paying up front or you're paying at the end. That's what I always say. You're paying one way or the other. So we're either going to pay up front and do it right, or whatever that means, or we're going to make the maintenance costs go up. And those are conversations you have to be honest with clients about. And a lot of times that's due to budgets, and it's understandable. But testing and having a testing plan of some sort is something that's important, I think. And it helps with, it's a security component in addition to other pieces. Documentation, document those roles. Why do I have these Drupal roles? Like the question I ask clients, what's that about? Why, you have roles, you don't even know what they do. Who's in those roles? When did they leave the company? The people that are in the role. I mean, that can happen. And then periodic third-party security audits. So this can mean a lot of things, and I don't have time to get into all that. And I appreciate you guys staying a little bit, but later. But I do want to say, consider some type of security audits that you could run on applications and that sort of thing periodically, and figure out some best practices around that. It probably is it's very dependent on budget, dependent on the type of application or website, and some of the needs that you have around it. But it's something that is out there and can be very beneficial. We do security audits at MediaCurrent, and I think they're helpful. We've had some really good responses from clients where they just didn't realize there were things that they could be doing to improve. A lot of it's just Drupal best practices, but there's lots of options out there for that. Security-related tools. These are just a few, and again, I'll have the slide deck out there. But these are just a few that I kind of like, and really like Site Audit. They're Drupal specific. Site Review, Site Audit, Coder we talked about, Hacked. Those are good ones to run. Observatory helps you with your HTTPS and will help identify some of those issues. And OWASP Zap is one that is a little. It's a lot heavier probably from a development standpoint to get into, but it may be something, an open source project worth having if you've got security folks that can help in IT. Let you do some of the things that maybe a third-party auditor might do when they do their audit, but you could do some stuff internal. And then everyone in the Drupal community lived happily ever after. That's the end of the story, but the module isn't released yet, stable, because we're being extra cautious, and there's still problems. But I think all these things, I would just say, put that security hat on. Think about security. Keep it in focus. None of us know it all. Learn from other people. Any questions from anybody?
Can I see that last slide? I didn't quite get
Yes. Sure.
It looked like pretty good resources.
Yeah, and so pretty much these are the Drupal-y ones. So if you do Drupal in front of them, you'll find them pretty easy. And there's others. This is not. I have an exhaustive list in a document I keep in Confluence, but I didn't put them all on here because some of them are like linters, JavaScript linters, and PHP linters, and some other tools that I found that seem to be good. But these cover a lot, and it's not on the tool list, but again, code reviews are super helpful.
Your module's not on there? That list?
Which module? You mean
Examples one?
the examples one? No, it's not on there yet.
What's the
We're
name of it?
not released. Well, it's not out there yet.
Not even as a...
Not a sandbox yet. That's why I was just telling these guys. I'm gonna I'm going to push it up probably tonight or in the morning, and when I put the slide deck out. But I want to add a few more comments in there just because to explain a little bit. Because so here's the thing. So I have, and I think some people have caught on in the security team, but I've got Google Alerts set for a lot of words that are super helpful. So I see anytime security and Drupal come up on the net, and it's nice, but it's great. I mean, catching on is great to that. But I have a feeling that that's being done, and so anytime you post anything that has the word security in it, a number of people in the Drupal community immediately get alerted from some fashion or another, and so I just want to make sure that I have the good description, and all the mornings. I don't want to be slapped on the wrist.
Code in there commented out along with bad code.
That sounds like a great idea. I could do the @code comments like you see, and I think that's what the examples module does. They do @code blocks, so I probably will do that, fix all those up. So we'll get that out there, and I'll tweet. I'll do like Zach said earlier. I'll tweet it out. So I'll do hashtag DCATL. I think it is. So we'll get it out there. Any other questions?
Yeah, you mentioned some public audit sites. Do you have any recommendation on those?
Public sites.
Like third-party sites that will do security audits?
Oh, that like you could hire to do a security audit kind of thing? So there's a bunch of companies that do it. You could probably find some local to you, like if you want to be local. I don't know how anybody that I could specifically feel comfortable recommending per se, but there's I will say this. So there's also some expensive systems that you can subscribe to, license, and they may be thousands of dollars to run a report. So if you have that kind of budget, you can do that. There's companies that do that. Just keep in mind, some of those, they'll spit out this huge long report. It'll, be ready. Don't be frightened by the report. It's just a lot of information. And it will at least mark what's more critical and what's, a lesser issue. But you need, one way or another, you need to have a trusted security certified type person that to review those reports and determine what should be remediated and what doesn't need to be. So most corporations that have security teams, they'll have a license for a system like that, and they'll do it internal. They'll run that report. So yeah, I would check out. I would check out. OWASP might have a list of people. I don't know, but
Crest is a list of places that have all signed a ethics certification, and they've got standards that they've set for how good the penetration testers are for those companies.
You said Crest?
CREST.
Good. That's what I was looking for. Is exactly that, David. It's hard to just recommend anybody that just, if you search security and I don't know what you're going to get. So,
If you've got really tough customers, banks or government agencies or stuff, financial institutions, a lot of them specifically require, when you get your site audited, that they're using a penetration tester from that Crest list.
Okay.
Because their standards are so stringent.
Yeah, that sounds like a great suggestion.
Pretty strong requirement. So we are the media company. I work for Partner, so we have many sites, so we have to.
Yeah, and you may have a security team internal that already has.
For what to look for, so that's why.
Yeah, I would definitely chat with the security department, and then what you may find out from them. A lot of the security departments are just resource constrained, like everybody else in IT. So you could talk to them and say, where are you guys? What should we be doing? What can you do for us internal? What can you not do just because of resources? And then you could determine what do you need to go out and have third party done. But it's always good to have, the third party thing is really about having someone who wasn't involved with the IT side of things, someone that wasn't involved with the code, to do it so there's not a conflict. No one could ever say there was a conflict.
Part of what Crest does is they've taken categories of penetration testers. So even within the specialty of penetration testing, you can specialize in web application penetration testing.
Right.
So they've kind of divvied out and said, these are the companies that are really good at that.
Cool. Any other questions? I want to say I appreciate you guys hanging here for the last session. This feels special. Each and every one of you are special to me. I want you to know that. But anyway, I think there's an after party tonight, and World of Beer or something like that. Or go to your co-working space and game, or do whatever's going on for people. But anyway, thanks for coming today. Appreciate it. Thanks.